Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Companies constantly survey their customers to determine what they like about the products and services that are offered and what they would like to suggest adding or changing. As public entities have increasingly begun to think of their citizens as customers, they too have begun to use surveys to determine customer satisfaction levels with public services. The city of Cincinnati has been surveying its residents for over 20 years. During 1997, the city worked with the Institute of Policy Research at the University of Cincinnati to assess the level of current citizen satisfaction. The results of that survey were released about 10 days ago. To discuss the results of the survey and its implications for setting city priorities, I am joined this morning by two guests. John Shirey, of course, is the Cincinnati City Manager, and Al Tuchfarber is the Director of the Institute for Policy Research at the University of Cincinnati. Welcome back to Newsmakers for both of you. John, from the city's perspective, what's the motivation? What drives you for taking these sorts of surveys on a pretty regular basis every 2 years or so?
Well, I think there are probably several motivations, but one in particular that drives this is that we honestly want to know how we're doing in the eyes of our citizens. Just as you were talking about, private companies need feedback in terms of how people like their products or services. It's the same for us. We happen to be in the service business, and if we don't ask people how we're doing, we'll never know for sure how we're doing, and so we just honestly need the feedback to be able to assess our services. But it also helps us to make decisions about how to allocate resources. There's a finite number of resources to do all the things that we're expected to do, and we better make sure that we're putting our money in the places where people want it to be.
Okay. Al, on a technical level here, you know, people are always interested in surveys and how many people really got surveyed and asked questions, and is that enough and all of that. How many people were asked questions in this survey?
Just over 500 were surveyed. There were probably 100 questions that they were asked, and the cooperation rate, as usual, was excellent. And the accuracy is generally thought to be plus or minus about 4%.
Okay, so 500, you know, from a layman's terms, doesn't sound like much, but in fact, you feel pretty confident that this is a reflective survey, a survey that's useful.
Very useful. We use very rigorous scientific methods to conduct the survey, and it is a representative sample of the citizens of the city of Cincinnati.
And do you have enough people there that you can get breakdowns in terms of not just gross attitudes, but certain types of people maybe living in certain types of neighborhoods or particular racial backgrounds have different attitudes? Can you determine that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely. We have plenty of people in the survey to break the sample down by race, by education level, by income, by the big chunks of the city. In particular, we broke it down by what they're called the CNAS areas, which are service areas. So there's a variety of things that we've done.
John, taking a look at the results of this survey, what was it that people were happiest with about the city?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that in terms of overall satisfaction, 87% of the respondents said they were satisfied with city services. That to me is quite a statement about the job that we're doing, because I figure on any day 5 to 10% of the people are mad or upset about something, and to get a survey that says 87% are satisfied with city services, that's not too far away from almost a perfect response for us. There were certain services that were singled out as being higher than the others in terms of that satisfaction level, and they really were four. One are fire services, which every time we do this survey usually comes up high. Second was paramedic services, which of course are life-saving kinds of activities.
And might also point out, also delivered by the fire department.
So fire division delivers both of those services, of course. Third was satisfaction with the maintenance of our parks. Quite a different service than fire service. The fourth one, though, is the one I think I'm most proud of, and that's garbage collection. You know, the thing that we all rely on every day of the week doesn't get a lot of attention, and it certainly is not glamorous, but people said garbage collection was something they thought the city was doing a very good job with, and That's, of course, good news to the 200 people that are out there riding those trucks every day that pick up the garbage and have a really tough job.
I want to come back to that a little bit later, and I will come back to garbage, but to look at the other end now on this survey, John was just listing those things that people were most satisfied with. Were there areas that you were able to identify that people felt needed some significant improvement?
There are a number of priority areas that do need some improvement, and as John indicated, City Council and the administration have used this survey for years to readjust the budget as they see areas that come up. In particular, the last two surveys have shown that programs for children, programs for teenagers, and young adults are a high priority for improvement. We have an interesting sort of technical approach that we take to this, where we rate both the satisfaction that the citizens have with the service and also the priority that they give it for new spending. And the two pieces of information together allow the city and the administration and the council to see where the really high priorities are. And as I indicated, it's really children's programs, young adults, teenage programs that the public wants to see addressed. Some other interesting ones are things like rehabbing housing, and that's also a priority. Also race relations.
You know, just to make this perfectly clear, as I understand the survey, you not only asked people what needed to be improved, but what they were willing to raise their taxes to improve. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In fact, when we were designing this survey originally about 20 years ago, all the standard questions used around the country were just what's important to you, and people would say, well, everything's important to me. And we wanted a hard-nosed pocketbook approach here in Cincinnati. So we developed a new form of question that nobody else had used that basically said, you don't get to say that you want a service improved unless you're willing to say you'll pay more taxes for it. That gets very hard-nosed, and it really drives down the number of people that say they want new spending.
John, concretely in this area of youth, children's, and teen programs, for example, what are some concrete ways that the city could respond, either with new programs or expansion of existing programs? You know, concretely, how do you respond to that sort of suggestion?
We've been aware of a sentiment in our citizenry that they want to see more attention paid to children's programs. One of the examples of how we're addressing that is in the budget that was just approved a few days ago. There is funding in that budget for yet another recreation center in this city, and we have many recreation centers already. But we don't have them in some underserved areas of the city, and so here's money for another.
And where's that new one
recreation
going to
center.
go?
City Council still has to make that decision, but there are about 4 areas that are competing for that in terms of where we've identified needs. A second area is just expanding the hours of our recreation centers and the particular programs that we have provided. The Recreation Department is now thinking about how it is that they can make sure that their programs are better tailored for teenagers as well as young persons, and maybe a little less emphasis will be placed in, say, adult programming in order to be able to make up this gap that people are perceiving for children's programs. I think, though, there's another implication out of that question, and it shouldn't be lost on on people that are looking at it. In some ways, people are saying there are problems with our young people, and I don't know whether it's coming out in the survey quite this directly, but it's almost like saying, well, we think government needs to be substitute parents. That's really not good. It's identifying a broader community need, in my mind, not just saying, well, hey, somehow the city needs to be doing more than that in that area.
Yeah, it's not just a new government program that's going to address that concern. In that area of budget implications, one of the things that you listed as one of the services that people are very happy with is garbage collection. Are we facing, though, in this next year, even though people are very happy with that as it stands, doing a good job, that we're going to have to spend more money on that in order to maintain that level of service because of the closing of ELDA and the cost of trucking garbage outside the city. Is this going to be an area that, even though we're happy with it, we're going to have to spend more money on it?
Well, there isn't any question that we're going to have to spend more money on it. In a way, we've been fortunate for many years in that we've had a close-by site for disposal of our refuse when many other cities have been trucking their refuse to some far-off destination for years. So our costs are going to go up. We, however, increased our costs about $1 million this past year in order to provide year-round yard waste collection and disposal. We're probably going to have to increase our costs another $1 million this coming year in order to be able to truck our refuse further in order to dispose of it. So that's just the cost of providing that service. One thing I would note, though, is that we're still providing that service, in effect, free. That is, you don't pay a separate fee. It's part of overall taxes that you pay. Most cities long ago went to a fee for service for refuse collection. In Cincinnati, it's still free.
Okay.
There's an important point here about basic services like garbage collection and police and fire and emergency medical services. Those are the core services that the citizens of any city expect to be done right. Cincinnati does them right, and that's one of the reasons why they get rated so highly in the overall satisfaction with services and also the overall satisfaction with the quality of life in the neighborhoods of this city. Because basically the core things are being done well, and that's really what a city gets evaluated on more than anything else.
You know, one of the things that it seems to me this survey is really focused on is the area, the services that are delivered or experienced in the neighborhoods, as opposed to some of the more global issues that end up on the evening news. But one of the areas that I found kind of interesting was there seemed to me, Al, that there was a turnaround in the view of where downtown is headed and people's feelings about whether we were on the right track with the downtown. Do you read the results the same way?
Absolutely. That was one of the most important findings in the survey. Is 2 years ago when we did the survey, the general perception among the citizens of the city was that the downtown was declining. We had twice as many people saying it was going downhill as it was improving. In this survey, those numbers have just reversed. We have now twice as many people in the city saying that the downtown is improving as saying it's declining. That's a tremendous turnaround. I think it's very positive news for the city and for the whole region, because the downtown is so important for the whole future of the region.
I might add on that point that the actual survey was conducted prior to the opening of Fountain Place, which has gotten a lot of play and a lot of attention. So it says even without that great news attention that's been placed there in recent weeks, that the perception is very positive that our downtown is getting better.
You know, we only got about a minute and a half left here. I want to divert slightly from the direct questions of the survey. Just like downtown, there's not a lot of questions, but there's some key questions about that. The area of economic development, and earlier in the week you and I were talking about the implications of the Castellini move. That doesn't get picked up in the survey. I mean, I didn't see any questions dealing with economic policy and whatever. Are there huge chunks out there of city services that maybe people don't experience on a day-by-day basis, but we ought to be aware of, we're not talking about this morning, like economic development, that also need improvement here?
It's impossible in a survey like this to cover everything the city does. This survey looked at 25 to 30 services, and there's really good data about those, but of course we provide many more than that. The survey did deal, though, with neighborhood business development, neighborhood businesses, and one of the sentiments there was that people would like to see more attention paid on neighborhood business development, so that has feedback for us. But sure, there are many other things that we could have looked at, but it's very hard for citizens to gauge how we're doing in terms of something as kind of amorphous as economic development. As Al said, people pay attention to the basic services, and that's what they responded to in this survey.
Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll track to see what City Council does with this survey and the results.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
One of the biggest projects on the city's plate in 1998 is the renovation of Fort Washington Way. Stay tuned. After the break, we will meet the creative team that is refining the vision to transform Fort Washington Way from a scar on the urban landscape into a pedestrian-friendly environment. Welcome back. Beginning in February 1998, the first preliminary work will start on the huge renovation of Fort Washington Way. Demolition will begin in earnest in July, and for slightly more than 2 years, the critical link in the regional expressway system will undergo a $120 million transformation. The creative team behind the project was in town last Monday and Tuesday with their latest drawings and models. I sat down with two of the principals. Alex Krieger is the chief urban designer, and he is the dean at Harvard University School of Urban Design. Tom Ryan, the chief landscape designer, is also from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and is a principal with Hargreaves Associates. After the interview, we will leave you with some seasonal sounds of Linda Greaser's harp, which has enlivened the PNC lobby for 18 years. And now, Fort Washington Way. Alex, when you look at Fort Washington Way today, what is it that you see there?
Well, it's a mess. It completely disengages the downtown from its river, the historic connection there. It may satisfy traffic well, although I doubt that's the case because of so many turning radii and options people have. Certainly from a pedestrian standpoint or from just a continuity of an urban experience standpoint, it certainly acts as a divider rather than a connector. It's not so atypical. I mean, many cities have done this to their waterfronts, and many cities are paying the price now for altering it.
Alex, realistically, what can be done with Fort Washington Way?
It's being narrowed from a 650-foot right-of-way to about a 300-foot right-of-way, but within that, half of that are going to be two surface boulevards, the new 2nd Street and the new 3rd Street. Right now, those seem to be parts of the highway. They're kind of interchangeable with the highway and don't behave like normal city streets. When we're done, they will be normal city streets. You'll make the decisions about getting on and off the highway a bit earlier, and when you come up onto 2nd and 3rd Street, you'll be on a normal, dare I say even beautiful, downtown boulevard, well planted, well landscaped, well lit with special lighting. So the experience will be phenomenally different. There still will be a highway beneath you, and it will be wide and it will be efficient, but will be essentially out of sight and hopefully out of mind to some extent.
Is it really possible for that concrete mess to become a pleasing place in the urban landscape?
As you cross any of the 5 bridges, Elm, Race, Vine, Walnut, Main, and you look down, you certainly will still seeing fast-moving vehicles below you. But unless you look down, you will be aware of planter beds, trees, decorative fencing, decorative lighting, prominent bridges. So the normal cues that you will have is of a rich and tactile environment. Secondarily, you will know that you're crossing over a highway. A very good analogy, although it'll look perhaps different, of course, would be the way that you cross from Michigan in Chicago when you cross Michigan Avenue onto Grant Park. And you're crossing a very broad stretch of railroad tracks beneath you, but somehow the generosity of those bridges, really platforms, the railings that they use, again, the lighting, make you feel as if you're walking through a well-designed, almost park-like environment over to the lakefront, rather than over thin, decrepit little bridges above railroad tracks. So there's going to be a similar intent here.
Tom, landscaping can make the difference between success and failure in an urban project like this. How important is it to the redesign of Fort Washington Way?
The platform bridges really are something special at the pedestrian scale as well. And they're going to have planters that you can sit on and flowers that'll be different through the year and really reduce that scale and reduce that perceived gap down by making it a special place. The other place we're looking at is the area along 2nd Street and 3rd Street. And both of those are going to have the same basic structure, and then we're going to have a double row of trees on the trench side, something that will be a spatial marker that kind of fill in the scale of the street but also we'll have a high canopy, large trees, and create a space underneath, a space that'll give you that gap in the city, that park-like atmosphere, a place people can go.
Alex, you've talked about several different types of platforms and bridges for pedestrians, and two of them are going to be a little bit more elaborate than the others. Could you describe those?
All 5 bridges, of course, have to serve the pedestrian very well and overcome this gap that the highway is today and allow you an easy experience across, say from 3rd to 2nd down towards the river. That's true of all 5. But the 2 end bridges at Main and at Elm have another role to play as well. As you're approaching in a car from the interstate system, at moments you are really looking directly ahead at the Elm Street connector or at the Main Street connector, and that's where a certain iconographic scale at the scale of the downtown seems important as well, sort of a signature statement, a gateway statement that brackets this 5-block area that moves across from the downtown riverfront. So there we're designing 2 cable stay bridges. The city of Cincinnati has a great tradition, a glorious tradition of marvelous bridges across the river. These won't cross any water, but nonetheless, we believe should be somehow inspired by that tradition because they'll be perceived from a distance as well as locally.
The lighting fixtures that are on these models are pretty striking. How are they really going to work?
Well, the lighting system is actually a composite of off-the-shelf pieces. It's not a custom light pieces, but it's how it's combined really makes it striking form. And there are 4 light fixtures or 4 different light sources in each fixture. One of the sources will light the highway. One of the sources will cast light out beyond. It's actually a bounced source, an indirect lighting source. Another light is a marker, kind of at eye level, that will tend to mark the edge of the trench, both from below and from above. And then we have a 4th light that actually lights the area underneath the canopy.
The city and state have appropriated $120 million for Fort Washington Way. Although that seems like a massive budget, will it be enough to achieve the proposed vision?
It's a tight budget. No one claims that it's a generous budget for the amount of work that is being done. This is a major, major infrastructure project. We believe that it's sufficient. Of course, I'd be foolish not to say that if it was 10% larger, 20% larger, that it would be better. Like any other product or any other environment, the attention to detail becomes the difference between making it, a B- or a B+ or an A-. First rate, truly first rate, exceptional, or simply merely very good. We're going to get a very good environment for that $120 million. If there were additional sponsors that were willing to, for example, the extension of the Gateway program that was discussed several years ago, if they were willing to contribute a bit more, we certainly would welcome it, and perhaps it would convert some of the pedestrian scale amenities from being very good to being exceptional. And of course, the city deserves an exceptional product.
And if this vision is executed as proposed?
Well, I think from my standpoint, our standpoint, we're hoping that what now is perceived as the back of the downtown, with all the 3rd Street has all the parking garages facing onto 3rd Street and the back entrances and things, that it'll be seen less as the back than as the new front. That when people come in, they'll come in on 2nd or 3rd Street and really get a good feeling for Cincinnati being a special and a new and a vital place.
Obviously, I'm very excited. I think that many of the things that the project currently calls for, and hopefully we will deliver, again, in terms of the planting, the lighting, the treatment of the trench walls, the design of the bridges, will show, I think, the rest of the country how important it is not to think of these merely as infrastructure projects, as engineering efforts, but really as designs for the city. And I think that after August 2000, other cities will look to this as a real exemplar in their efforts to kind of re-civilize their downtowns.